Okay, so we are live. If there are still image issues, what I'm just going to do is just switch over to having a static image and we will just go with a podcast sort of vibe. So, sorry for the wait, everyone. Okay, so just let me know in the chat if there's any issues. Yeah. YouTube is still telling me that there's issues with maintaining a smooth stream experience. It could just be the computer I'm streaming from. So, okay, glad to hear that it happy Monday. We have a green screen now. Unlimited power and all that. Hello, Prince Murloc. Welcome. So what I was going to be talking about before the stream decided to give up on me is we do have the new master rule, which will be going into effect in April. So basically, I mean, this is massive for the game, as I'm sure you all know. It just opens up so many new possibilities. We've already seen a lot of hype based around it. A lot of people are hyping up Synchro. A lot of people are hyping up things like Bahamut Shark, totally awesome. We see Dimension Barrier really spiking in popularity. So, you know, there are a lot of interesting developments that we've seen because of this. And it's definitely something we're going to keep track of. Remember, we're still like 4 months away from this change. There's going to be OTS packs released. There's going to be product released. I wouldn't be too keen on jumping into the kind of hyped cards for the format because a lot of those we can expect to see re-released before the format kind of goes live per se. So that is something to be mindful of. It is very exciting. Like, I'm very hyped. There is a lot of decks that I want to take a look at. There's things like Six Samurai, which is a very fun combo deck. Paleo is a deck that I've played a lot of in the past. So there's a lot of interesting directions. Synchro Spam is maybe good. I'm not somebody that's played it much in the past, but definitely something worth considering. So that's quite cool. It's interesting that we're getting this at the same time as Japan, because with previous rules updates, the update for Master Rule 4 is something that we did not get until we got the product for the new TV series, whereas this Master Rule just happens immediately. So perhaps Konami have decided, hey look, it's just better to get things back to normal as soon as possible. Obviously, Master Rule 4, while it did kind of make the game healthier for a while, until the kind of generic down arrows were printed, I think they were definitely the turning point of the format. Those are Nightmares. Nightmares were very strong. But the generic link down arrows were definitely massive in how they affected how easy it was to gain those extra link arrows. Demandi 69 triple Dante boards return. That is true. But why stop at triple Dante when you can do triple Dante plus double break sword? You know, there's a lot of potential for doing silly things, which is cool. And like you point out there, triple Dante is a deck that a lot of people like playing. So there's a lot of space for really kind of getting to revisit old favorites and then seeing, is there space for those in the modern game? It also makes Trad more interesting because suddenly a lot more decks become viable. But enough about rules update. Everybody's heard about that. The next exciting thing is we have a new hand trap announced. So for people who aren't super aware, the first hand trap that we got in this cycle was Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which was in Crossed Souls back in 2015, I think. And then we've gotten one every summer since then. So Eternity Code, which should be our summer set this year, and it should also be the last set of Link era, is going to have this monster. We have a fan title for it, which is Evening Crescent and Autumn Shower. It's a level 3 wind zombie tuner. It has 0 attack, 1800 defense, so this matches up with most of the Ghost Girls. Ghost Ogre obviously being the exception, as Ghost Ogre is a psychic for some reason, which was very relevant because it was searchable off of... you could summon it off emergency teleport during your opponent's turn and use its effect from the field, which was kind of cute. DDD is very interesting. Somebody's just pointed it out in chat. That's a deck that I played a lot of. It's a deck that I could see doing very well. The one thing with DDD, and this is something I've been discussing with some of the guys from the team, is DDD is such a complex deck that you are more likely to lose to yourself not playing your deck to its maximum than you are to losing to your opponent. And when you're playing a 10-15 round tournament, that's something that you really have to be aware of. You need to really be on your game if you're going to be playing a deck like that. Back to the hand trap though, just for people who haven't seen it. So if your opponent special summons a monster face up, you can discard it, target one of the face up monsters that was in part of that summon, negate that target's effects for the rest of the turn, and if you do, if it leaves the field this turn, inflict damage to its controller equal to its original attack. So I at first saw this, and I hadn't read the effect fully, and I was just like, this is bonkers, because you like Nibiru your opponent, and then you target the token, and you can just OTK them. But that does not work, because you cannot negate the Nibiru token. This card is interesting. I question how viable it is. As people kind of point out, is it better than Infinite Impermanence? Probably not. How often is the burn damage going to be relevant? The burn damage is only relevant if you go first and it's your opponent's turn when time is happening. So it doesn't match up very well. And then also the fact that Effect Failure is just generically stronger. And Effect Failure is more easily searchable as well. Means that this doesn't seem like it's going to do terribly much. But who knows, if the effect becomes very relevant, like if you want to play extra Veilers, or if for some reason you get punished for playing Impermanence, then you could perhaps see a set of 3 of this plus 3 Effect Veiler for redundancy. You could technically play 9 Veilers, but I'm not convinced that that is the case. On the other hand, artwork is gorgeous. This is probably my favorite artwork of the Ghost Girls. At the same time, I am born in August, so I do favor the autumn card. But it's pretty cool. Yeah, DDD is very complex. Like Fire Fist, but less bricky, definitely the case. I'm not convinced that DDD has a place in the new format, even despite the fact that it is a very fun deck, and it does have a lot of kind of... It does a lot of stuff, but it seems like it's probably just worse than Pendulum, because Pendulum is our combo deck going into the format. If your combo deck doesn't do more than Pendulum does, then it's not competitively viable. Wind Witches are an engine that Prince Murloc is pointing out in the chat here, and that's definitely one that I would keep an eye on. If you can pick them up easily, I probably would. Just generically, when you just can summon a free Crystal Wing, it's pretty decent. It's something that I would keep an eye out for. Joe McMahon says he thinks that people are looking backwards too much with Master Ruler Revision. Yeah, I definitely would agree that people are looking backwards a lot. I don't know if it's necessarily the biggest issue, though, because so much of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is based on taking knowledge that we have from a format and pulling it forwards. So it's good to explore the previous avenues, especially when we don't know what direction we're going forwards. At the same time, if Orcust is not hit, it is probably the best deck in April still, because, you know, being able to just summon a Dingirsu wherever you want is pretty good. You know, that's something that people do need to be aware of. Will the hand trap C play in OTK decks? Aggressive decks could potentially play the card, but if you know that your opponent is on an aggressive strategy, you potentially don't remove the card from the field anyway. Additionally, if it's used for an Xyz material, then it won't inflict the burn damage either. So those are things to be aware of. It is pointed out that, yes, Valor Turbo seems great. Synchro Turbo is interesting. I haven't seen enough to be convinced that Synchro Turbo has a place, but if people have links to Synchro Turbo combos, feel free to share them either in the chat here or else shoot them over to me on Facebook and I'll take a look, because it's definitely something that I'm interested to see. Demandi points out that Sight will probably see a resurgence. We could see Artifact Sanctum pick up, but I think Sanctum is best in the slightly more fair formats, and we're most likely moving into a combo format, at least for the start of the April rules revision. Once we get a list in that, presumably we're going to hopefully settle back down into something that's a bit more tempo-y, and then the Artifact engine can really do well. That said, if you're going first, Sanctum into Sight is kind of an OTK, depending on the deck you're playing against. Hopping off the new hand trap, Card Market Series Paris. This is something that's coming up. I know Tom's going to be there. I'm still looking into whether or not I will be going over for it. The exciting thing, though, is we can see that Oliver Gurman, who had been involved with the European YCS streams for the longest time and is somebody who myself and Tom have worked with on commentary, is going to be hosting the show over there. So that's really exciting. We're big fans of what Ollie has done for the game and the community. So it's really good to see him still involved with the Yu-Gi-Oh community, even if it's in a different capacity. So that's definitely something to check out. If you are in or around Paris, then I would definitely recommend checking the event out, because the Card Market Series has been growing over the past year, and it's definitely something that we want to see do well, because why only have 4 YCSs in a season when we could have 4 YCSs and a couple of Card Market Series as well? So hopefully this will be a big event. Regardless, do you ever really need an excuse to go to Paris? So yeah, Tom is definitely going to be there. I think he's going to be testing his hand at vlogging, so we'll see how that goes, and I should hopefully be there as well. So it is in Paris. It's on the 8th and 9th of February. If people are looking for further details, you can find them on Card Market or on Facebook in the Card Market Series Yu-Gi-Oh group. The Card Market Series event is an open event, so I will try and find a link for people, and I will throw it into the chat. But yeah, so pretty exciting event. It's always good to see more competitive events coming up. So just on the topic of going to this event, we have been kind of trying to work towards more content for you guys. If people have been paying attention to, there's YCS 225 coming up. That is not an event that we're likely to get over to. It is a bit far for us to travel from the UK and Ireland. Okay, and there is a link to the Card Market Series for anybody who is interested. With regards to what's better to go to, Card Market Series or YCS Utrecht, Utrecht is probably still going to be the bigger event. The Card Market Series generally has a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, just because you have a big hall with lots of different card games. So if you enjoy multiple card games, you might get more value just from going to the Card Market Series. If you're strictly wanting to focus on competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, then that's the one you want to focus on. Is Sydney 225? I think people were saying the next South American YCS is 225, but I'm not completely in the loop. I have been in kind of mild hibernation for the past few weeks. So if somebody in the chat knows better than me, feel free to correct me on that. Sydney is also, unfortunately, a bit far for Kuribrohs to be travelling at the moment. But it's definitely something we'd like to do at some point. Kind of carrying on from this, just something that I'd like to talk about shortly is the Versus Duel series that we had up on the channel recently. Would love to hear what people think about this. Basically, what happened is I'm after getting a set of webcams like this. I am after getting a set of kind of stands. And we have been testing a field kit which we can take out to regionals to record and stream live from them, the matches on table 1. So we've done a bit of footage. People seem to be watching them and enjoying them. So if you are interested in seeing more regional matches live, let us know. We did change about this setup for TKB Live last week, so we had a different angle to get a better view of the game field. But yeah, if you are interested in seeing more live content like that, let us know, because it is something we'd be interested in doing. Additionally, if you know any tournament organisers that are organising regionals coming up in the UK and Ireland, or if there's any large regionals with 200 plus players that are interested in having a live stream at them, feel free to get them in touch with us, because we are always interested in getting involved. The next thing that I want to talk about is the state of the format. Because we have Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope, my favorite little tool. So we have Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope here, and basically I just wanted to take a look at this. We haven't really looked at it in quite a while. It should be showing up on the screen. So the cool thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope is it takes the match data from Dueling Book and provides us insight into the format. So as we can see, this is the metadata for the last 7 days. It's important to note that the criteria that they use may not always be accurate, but we can get a good feeling for how much people are playing the format, and then also how decks are performing in the format at the moment. So we can see that the most popular deck in the past 7 days has been Salmon Great. This is pretty much how we've been for a very long time. Salmon Great has just maintained popularity both online and offline. For people who are interested, who haven't seen the website before, I'm just going to link it here in the chat for you. It's a very good kind of way to approach the game in a more scientific manner. It is important to note that these results may be biased, because you have to understand that this is taken from all of the games that are played. So, for example, we have decks here like just Pure Danger, or we have just Pure Six Samurai, and they might have very low win rates, but they might have more representation here than they do online, or than they do at a real tournament. So that can skew numbers. The really important thing here, though, is Salmon Great, 57% win rate. This is probably mostly against non-meta decks. I think when we see it played against stuff like the Orcus Sky Striker list, we're probably going to see the deck have much less than a 57% win rate. So that is something to be aware of. Now, the really big takeaway here is when we do a quick scan of all of the win rates, there's a lot of decks here, but once we get onto the second page, we see that they've only played like 200 games. So we can consider those pretty irrelevant. Endymion Mythical Beast, 182 games. But the big decks here, we start getting to kind of relevant stats. We see that Silman Great's at 57%. That's okay. Sky Striker Orcust, 65%. This is at least 5% higher than basically every other deck on this front page. That's really big, and it definitely shows an issue with the format. When you have one deck that is so much more successful than every other deck of the format, like, at this point you have to have a very strong reasoning if you are approaching the game from a purely competitive standpoint. You need to be able to say, I am not playing Orcus Sky Striker because X, Y, and Z. So that kind of is an issue with the format at the moment. Now, we do have a list due in January, so it could be that we see Orcus hit in that list, in which case all of these decks that we see around it, we see Thunder Dragon, we see True Draco, we see Altergeist. Altergeist somehow at 60%, which kind of baffles me. Trap cards are strong, I guess. It's surprising that Hero is so low, but again, Hero can be influenced by kind of, if somebody is playing a random Hero deck, it could pull down the win rate. Like, if I am just playing a deck which is like 3 copies of Avian, 3 copies of Burst Trinitix, it's not going to do much. But yeah, if there's any decks here that you guys want us to talk about, we certainly can. We do see Burning Abyss here with a 46% win rate, and I do have to wonder if this is the block BA deck. When we click on it, we can see the days that there are like high win rates and low win rates. So like on the 25th, on Christmas Day, somebody was at 74% with Burning Abyss. Now, with 35 games played, that's probably like 5 or 6 different people playing. But so we can see, sometimes it's very high win rate, but most of the time it's pretty low. That could be a case that there's just a lot of people who aren't experienced with the deck playing it. But it's important to kind of figure out what is the cause of these things. You're not playing Draco because Striker. Oh, you're not playing Draco Striker because money. That's totally fair. Draco Striker is very interesting. If the Striker package somehow doesn't get hit, but Orcus does, then Draco Striker might become the best Striker deck. Yeah, Striker Orcus, if you've not played Orcus before, probably isn't worth playing. Falling Rabbit, yes, all of this information comes from Dueling Book. So I know I have... There's a big Git repository where all of the Dueling Book matches just get sent to. And it just pulls the data from there. So if for some reason you are interested in seeing the raw data, just shoot me a message and I will find that and send it over to you. Because that's also quite interesting and potentially something that I want to look at some point. For now, though, we can also check out what cards have high win-loss ratios in the matches that they're played. So we see Ash Blossom has a 55%. So it's like a pretty okay card. It doesn't win you the game, but, you're not too sad to see it. It is generally good rather than bad. We see Kagari up at a 60%. We see Orcus Nightmare at a 62%. We see Galatea at 63%. So this is pretty clear that once an Orcus player sticks a Galatea on board, they are favoured to win the game. IP Masquerena as well. World Legacy World Wand is at a 64% win rate. This doesn't mean that World Legacy World Wand wins 64% of games. It means that in games where you are winning as Orcus, you are probably resolving your World Legacy World Wand, and that's something that is just important to understand about these win rates. Like, again, Orchestrated Babel. You don't win the game when you just play Babel, but the games that you win, you almost certainly have Babel. The other important and interesting thing with the match cards win rate is we will see that trap cards are always very low. So Orchestrated Return is 65% win rate because you only get that card when you're way ahead. But like here, Evenly Matched, 58% win rate. So Evenly Matched is only slightly better on these stats than Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is. We have Super Polymerization at a 49% win rate. I think this is really interesting because this is a card that a lot of people hype up and I am really not convinced by. So again, Super Polymerization's issue is that it doesn't progress your game state. So yes, it's really strong, can't be responded to. It does break boards, but it's not super versatile in terms of, you know, if there was a monster that just said fuse any two monsters on the field, that becomes very interesting. But while you have to have specific silver bullet slots for it, now you're putting silver bullets into your extra deck as well as into your side deck. And so, you know, having to give up 2 spaces for this action, which then costs you another card, you need to be playing a deck that benefits from the discard, or else you can very much fall behind with Super Polymerization. Prince Murloc, you have a Thunder Dragon deck IRL, but with the ban list coming, you might go back to Draco. Yeah, I mean, I think at the start of a format, Draco plus Flood Traps is probably a really nice place to be on. Draco Striker as well. Draco just has a nice versatility in terms of how it, you know, its floodgates are reliable. Destruction of spells and traps is good. Destruction of monsters is good. There's not really much else you need, and it has big beaters. So it's always important, if we have a big format shakeup, you want to go on the decks that are reliable. If we look to a game like Magic the Gathering, for an example, whenever they have a format shakeup, we see the aggressive burn decks become the first decks of the format, because aggro is consistent regardless. And so in Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you can find a consistent deck at the start of the format, that's generally all you need. Now, as we get further into a format, that's when you're going to have to start following along. And like at the moment, we have such a developed format that we can see that the Orcus deck is just so prominent. We see decks like Altergeist performing quite well because Altergeist is something that's able to, for example, main Evenly Matched. And Evenly Matched is quite strong against Orcus at the moment because the Orcus player often won't end with the counter trap card. So, you know, there's those interesting intricacies where once you know what the best deck is, you can play decks that prey on it. But I think overall at the moment, there aren't too many decks that truly prey on Orcus. You know, you can have an okay matchup against Orcus, but I don't think there's many decks that have a guaranteed win, with the exception of maybe Heroes, but that deck can struggle in other matchups. Failing Rabbit, reminds you of using Hypergeometric Calculator. Yeah, I mean, this is just another tool in your arsenal as a player to approach the game better. Hypergeometric Calculator is really important. You need to be ensuring that your deck has enough ways to actually play the game. And this is just a way to kind of get more value from your playtesting because you are using the time that others spend to generate a better image of what is good and bad. So Prince Murloc, you point out that Super Poly can be really good in decks. There are definitely decks where it is good, but I think like we see Mind Control here with a 54% win rate, and I think that's a much more generically strong card. Like, I considered just throwing Super Poly into any deck, and I came to the conclusion that I wouldn't. Whereas Mind Control pretty much any deck other than Draco or like Guru Control can play it. If you are going to Link Summon, it's pretty decent. Failing Rabbit, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you have a lovely evening and happy holidays. John has a regional on the 18th. Is it worth testing Salad or Sky Striker Orchest? So I do not rate Salmon Great highly at the moment. The deck still does a lot of stuff, but it and Sky Striker Orchest very much fall into similar roles in the format. And when you get into that position, it's a case of saying, well, which deck do you think is better? I would definitely lean towards Orchest being the better deck. Now, Orchest is going to see more hate, but a lot of the cards that interact negatively with Orchest will do the same with Salmon Great. So it doesn't have enough to distinguish itself from the deck. So in that case, I would definitely tend towards Sky Striker Orchest. Now, it does depend on what you have experience with. Like, if you have 100 hours into Salmon Great, but only, a day of testing with Orchest, then if you don't feel comfortable, I probably wouldn't take the deck. But I think if you have an equal amount of playtime on the decks, or you're unfamiliar with both of them, then I would definitely look to learn the Orchest deck more. The Orchest deck does have a lot of intricacies, but, it's a deck that's more likely to be able to just end the game with a counter trap, or with an interaction from a Topologic Trisveana or a Topologic Bomber Dragon. Okay, so yeah, again, I would highly recommend taking a look at this. The single decks can give kind of weird results. Like, we see Orchest Sky Striker up at 72% in single matches, which means main decked it's even better, but we also see things like Magical Musketeer at 69%. So single decks is something that I'm not convinced that single decks gives great information. Cosmic Dragon, will Cristrons shine again in March? I don't know if Cristrons ever really shone. They definitely were an interesting deck, and I'd love to see what they do. They're definitely one of the decks that I personally haven't really looked at much, due to the fact that they have kind of encyclopedias on each card. But, I do think that I'd love to see the deck do well. Welcome back to Mondi69. Prince Murloc, Salmon Great is hyper reliant on the graveyard, like Orchest or even BA. Yeah, I mean, Salmon Great is definitely... I think Salmon Great is more reliant on the graveyard. And the issue with Salmon Great, and this kind of touches off Daniel's question about how do you win versus Salmon Great if you're playing Orchest Sky Striker. If you Ash Blossom or Impermanence or Veiler the Mirage Stalio effect, Salmon Great can basically never end up on Dweller, and if they can't end on Dweller, they can't beat the Orchest boards. So that's my experience, is that once you stop Dweller with Orchest, if they have a Rage or a Roar, you're not too concerned. If they have both Rage and Roar, you're probably sad. But in those scenarios, you're probably fine. When you side, you get to bring in things like Mind Controls in the matchup, and that's just such a big blowout. So, and I think your Mind Controls are better than their Mind Controls, because basically they end on their board of Sunlight Wolf and, maybe they have Sunlight Wolf and Dweller. We get to Mind Control, take the Sunlight Wolf, or kill their counter trap, and then start playing our game plan. Whereas when they Mind Control, they hit our counter trap, or they trigger our IP Masquerena to go off. So that is why I would probably tend towards Orchest. And again, I think Orchest does better with Mind Control, which I think is one of the best cards in the format at the moment. it doesn't really care about Lancia. Like, somebody Lancias you, if they're not on a go second kill you deck, you don't really care. Especially, you can even just end on a Galatea and you get to play from there because you still have your monsters in grave to banish on the next turn. John, yeah, so if you're afraid of the ban list, like, realistically, Salmon Great could be the pick in that scenario. Do you have both of the decks? Is it just a case of, like, what should I invest time into testing? Because you kind of get into two situations where it's like, well, do I expect the ban list to hit both of these decks? If you think that it is going to hit one of those decks and you can't put the time in to test another deck if that does happen, then you should definitely, go with the safer one, which is probably Salmon Great. But if you're just aiming for the highest thing and you have a reasonable amount of time to put in, then, it's a case of you can... If you have the time to put it in, I would definitely be playing Orcust. I think it's more interesting to play. I think it has a higher ceiling. I think it's more impactful. So that would be my general feeling. Again, it is kind of a case of figuring out for yourself. And again, if you have loads of time on Salmon Great, maybe Salmon Great is to play. But I think Orcust, you just naturally win matchups. Like, I've played matches with Orcust where I see myself misplaying horrifically, but it works out fine. Stephen Martin says choo choo in the chat, and now I am terrified because trains are everywhere. For context, people, Stephen has been playing trains at locals. I played him in the finals of locals last week, I think, and narrowly managed to take the match from him. But trains is a terrifying deck. At some point, I will have to ask him if I can get a profile, because choo choo is scary. Like, it's one of the go second decks that does a lot. I don't think it gets buffed too much by the new Master Rule, but there are other spooky machine decks, such as Karakuri. Karakuri. So those are things to watch out for. Demandi69, Lancia isn't as good. Oh boy, I'm dreading Saturday. Yeah, no, Lancia does not get you there most of the time. Like, the issue is that Lancia doesn't solve the problem with Orcust, because the problem with Orcust is that Orcust sets up turn 1 and then kills you turn 2, and it doesn't prevent Orcust from having resources. So, if you Lancia your Orcust opponent and then on your turn you go Soul Release, then they're probably dead. If you Dimension Shifter, that card's really strong against Orcust, because you're denying them the resources as well. Okay, apparently trains get double Dora or max FTK, which is terrifying. Time Lord trains Shadal is really, really scary. Okay, guys, so, like, very importantly, Construct is that tree. For anybody who doesn't know me very well, Duelist Alliance format was when I started really getting into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! It's when I started judging, got me on the European scene. Shadal was the first deck I built in that format. I have my LT Construct still. Love the card to bits. Shadal Structure deck is coming out. Master Rule change means Shadals are playable. Super Polymerization is that tree. Like, we are very ready to play some bad Shadal decks in the coming months. But yeah, trains are hilarious. Shadal Fusion is one of the coolest cards designed. It's a pity that Shadal Fusion does lose to Ash Blossom now, which is not something it had to worry about in the past. But very cool card, and definitely really made a very interesting format. System Down is an interesting tech choice. System Down is probably better than Lancia if you just want to hit Orcust. The problem is that Lancia also has relevance against other decks in the format. So Lancia hits like the hero wombo combo deck, which is like summon Isolde, send equip spells, get malicious, and all that sort of stuff. It hits Thunder Dragon as well. I think Thunder Dragon hurts more when you Lancia them than other decks. Like I have Lancia decks, I've Lancia Thunder, and it has made them very sad. Invoked cries when you Lancia them because they can't fuse. You can chain it to their invocation, which is kind of hard. Invoked is an interesting deck. Invoked has a new fusion coming out in OCG land, and that's definitely something that I don't have the stuff ready for at the moment. But hey, let's just go over to Yu-Gi-Oh! Organization and take a look. So there have been a load of new cards revealed in OCG land. For people that don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Organization is a fantastic website. Pretty much where I go to just keep up with the news in general. So we have a new Unchained monster. Tom was talking about this in the team chat. Said something about it being a level 3 Dark Fiend. Apparently he likes those. But yeah, so I mean this one you can target an Unchained card in your graveyard, set it on your field, then destroy one card you control. This is interesting. If it's destroyed by battle or card effect, except by itself, you can special summon one Unchained from your hand or deck. It's interesting. Unfortunately, the best Unchained card isn't searchable, so that could be an issue. But it's cool that the deck is getting more support. It's definitely a deck that had a lot of hype going into the format and didn't see much. We have the new Lilith, we have Mallet, Maiden of Malice, another level 3 Dark Fiend, 1,000 attack, 1,000 defense. Tribute 2 monsters, then target one normal trap that is banished or in the graveyard, set it to the field, and return it to the deck when it leaves the field. Interesting card. Unless we see more Layer of Darkness support, I'm not convinced that it really does anything. But it's cute. Like, it's harmless. It's kind of cute that you can kind of play more Layer of Darkness activators. But the fact that you can't activate the trap card the turn that you set it is kind of eh. Yeah, so the other issue with System Down here is that System Down is stopped by Orchestra Crescendo, and Orchestra Crescendo is one of the big limiting factors of the format. If Orchestra just had Babel, then there would be a lot more stuff you could do. You could main Mystical Space Typhoon and force interaction a lot earlier. Obviously, between Babel, IP Masquerena, and Gizmek, Orchestra has so many kind of quick points of interaction that it really changes the dynamic a bit. But I think you could hit Crescendo or Babel, and the deck is still playable with one of the two. But it's still playable with one of the two, but it's definitely a weaker deck. So yeah, I definitely don't think System Down is the right choice, because I think it's just a case that Orchestra is really strong. If you wanted to play System Down, it's possibly correct to just be on an evenly matched deck, because that punishes them harder. Yeah, Lancia coverage means that Lancia is probably correct to play. And we've seen a long period of time where Lancia has just been the most sided side deck card. Before that was Pankratops. Pankratops became a lot worse once Orchestra was playing Sky Striker cards, because being able to Shark Cannon back the opponent's Pankratops and pop their cards makes Pankratops a lot worse. Yeah, so Prince Murloc, you point out, problem with Thunder is that you can be stopped by Lancia from going full combo. The other problem with Thunder is that the full combo at the moment, if you're playing the medium range Thunder, which is the one that does like the Titan and Colossus stuff, you get stopped by a Dingirsu. If the Orcust opponent can climb into Dingirsu, they break your board. Orcust is maining triple impermanence, which is the natural counter to the deck. So I think Thunder Dragon is really kind of weakly footed at the moment. The Wombo combo deck, it has choke points. It loses 2 hand traps quite often, so that's something to be aware of. Like, it's cool, it's flashy, but, if you're going to play Wombo combo, you can play Pendulum. So I'm not crazy on Thunder Dragon at the moment, even though I think at some point it's going to do a lot. Cosmic Dragon, I also miss the simpler times of Pendulum Magicians. We actually have a really cool content that I'm looking forward to share with you guys. So it's a series that myself and Tom are going to be working on. We're still working on the concept phase of it, but I'm hoping to have it out for the new year. But basically, we're going to be going through past decks and really taking a deep dive look at them. So obviously, the Pendulum Magician structure deck is one that I'd been looking at because I went through and I built all of the decks on Duel Link Book. So every single sealed deck ever released in the TCG, I have built up, and we're going to be looking at them properly. So, that's a deck that I think will be really interesting. Layer of Darkness is a really cool deck, very interesting, but it really needs a lot if it were to be a deck on its own. There was some hype around it when it first came out, but I just don't think it really got anywhere, which is a pity. So Maximilian asks if we can talk about the new Gizmek. I will need to just find the new Gizmek. That's the big T-Rex dinosaur thing, right? I assume it's on here somewhere. If not, if somebody has a link to it, I would ask you to post it, but I'm pretty sure YouTube does not let other people share links. So we will find it. We were discussing the new Gizmek in the team chat, and one of the things that was pointed out is that we're going to be getting it around the same time as the new Master Rule update. And that is perhaps an issue for it, because it cares about the extra monster zone. Ooh, this is cool. There's new Herald support. That's pretty interesting. Eventually we will actually find the card that we are looking for. Oh, there's a new Machina deck. That's pretty cool. We've actually seen Machina Fortress seeing play. Goes back up. So we have Miyazuchi, the Nuclear Emperor. So I assume this is the new Gizmek that you're talking about. Herald support is really cool. Yeah, so this card's pretty interesting. Being able to summon a 2700 beater is quite nice. Being able to have a main deck 1000 Eyes Restrict is also quite nice. Again, the issue with this is that, it suffers from the fact that if there's no extra deck, or if people aren't required to summon 2 extra monster zones, it becomes a lot worse very quickly. So that's something to be kind of mindful of. 9 stars is interesting, though. The 9-star deck is a deck that I definitely am interested in looking at more, because it does a lot of fun stuff. So something to keep an eye out for, but I think we're probably not going to see this do as much as Orochi does, because Orochi is just bonkers. People were talking about some of the cards that showed up. There's a bunch of cool new stuff coming out. The new Raw artwork looks awesome. The Herald support is really cool, and that's one of the great things about Yu-Gi-Oh! So as somebody who plays a lot of trading card games, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably the best at really kind of tugging on nostalgia. you see cards like this and this, which reference previous cards, and then you have new support for things like Shadal's. The game has just such a great way of really engaging with what you like about the game and pulling new cards out. So that's something that we're really interested to take a look at. Do we do some duels with today's meta? You really want to see what Zodiac versus Orchid Sky Striker. I mean, Zodiac, there's like the Zodiac, there's a Zodiac variant of Lunalight that I played against at London. That's kind of cute. You just play like Turboblade and Barrages as a mini engine. Zodiac itself definitely does not do anything without access to either Broad Bull or Trident. And as we don't have either of those in the TCG at the moment, looking at you, Mr. Banlist, I don't think there's much reason to look at it. Now, something that I am going to do now is I am going to host a lobby. And we are going to play some Squirrel while we chat. So if anybody has a Squirrel deck built, you are welcome to shoot me a challenge on this. And we can get a good old game of Squirrel in. For people who don't know, Squirrel format is a format that the Bristol crew of Kuribrohs have been working on for a couple of years now. It's basically just a variant of... Ignore the Noble Knights. Dual note moo. Password moo. Yeah, so Squirrel is the format that we play instead of Goat, because it just provides a slightly more balanced experience. Old Zodiac versus new Sky Striker Orchest. That would be an interesting duel. I don't have the stuff set up to do that at the moment, but I mean, it's definitely something that I can see if we can arrange. One of the issues we have at the moment, just for creating content, is I am pretty far away from the Bristol guys and pretty far away from a lot of the Irish guys as well. So that is something that does kind of limit us a little bit. Stephen Martin says, the only cards I want from the ban list is Pot of Avarice and Redox for Karakuri. No. I don't think Redox can ever come back, because in a vacuum, it's the best Dragon Ruler. Like, being able to Monster Reborn stuff is really strong. Do we have any info on the TCG exclusive archetype coming out in Ignition Assault? Also, Unban Litasagam, that is the most triggering username I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, Litasagam very much deserves to be banned. That card was bonkers. It's a really cool card, but like, my goodness, my extra deck. I would love to see another TCG exclusive archetype that really kind of impacts the format. I mean, it's been so long since we've had a TCG exclusive archetype that was relevant in the format it was printed. Obviously, we saw Spiral become the best deck ever, but that was after the fact. So that's kind of, it's something a little odd. You want double Iris back, but you're biased towards Spend. I really don't. Well, here's the thing. I have no issue with Pendulum. I do have issue with Pendulum having infinite negates. I don't like that design. I think Pendulum is really mechanically cool. The idea that you can keep summoning cards back, really interesting. It's kind of like an infinite value engine. But having yeah, I like the deck just does too much at the moment. Just being able to summon like many Jackal Kings is kind of crazy. Has been pointed out that Dangers were TCG exclusive. Those cards were pretty good. It never really felt like Dangers were the deck. Dangers, from a design perspective, Dangers are very close to being Upstart Goblin. Because basically, if we look at how Dangers work, so let's say this is our Danger and a generic card. Is that visible? No. Okay, 1 second. We have a Danger, and we have another card. Our Danger is apparently kind of see-through. But yeah, so we have our Danger and our other card. So we activate the effect of our Danger. It summons itself and draws a card, and sends this card to the graveyard. If this card is a card that does anything in the graveyard, now we have gotten a free body on board. We have gotten a card back into our hand. So we have one card in hand. We have a live card in our graveyard, add a body on the field for link climbing. And that means that there was a lot of kind of design in terms of deck building where you could treat Dangers as effectively just Upstart Goblin. It's what we saw with Orcust. Orcust didn't care that Dangers hit cards from their hand because the cards were more valuable in the graveyard than in the hand. If you'd printed Dangers in like mid-2000s Yu-Gi-Oh!, then, you know, Dangers in mid-2000s Yu-Gi-Oh! Wouldn't be as bonkers because it's just like, I just summon a dorky guy and you're like, fine. But when they allow you to extend your links, when they allow you to essentially cycle cards, that's when they kind of became an issue. But again, I don't think that they were ever the deck. They just facilitated Dark Worlds being best deck, and then also Orcust and a few other things like that. Definitely very interesting cards, but also like insane. The power level of those cards is just like an 11 because they just draw a card. Etchelite says Litisagem 2-1 is fine. Litisagem 2-1 is fine, but it's not really. I don't think Litisagem 2-1 can happen. If you were to errata Litisagem, so it only banished one card, or it banished randomly, probably fine. But the power that Litisagem gives is so absurdly high. It completely warps the format in terms of deck building. If you resolve Litisagem against an opponent, you can clear like a Boral Sword. Against something like Sky Striker, you just kill the deck. You could kill Striker immediately by just putting Litisagem 2-1. And the other issue with Litisagem at 1 is the card is searchable and it's cyclable. So, you know, it's not like it's hard to find. I don't think the difference between 1 Litisagem and 3 Litisagem is very big, is what I'm saying. Prince Murloc wants Trident back and maybe Masterpiece. Trident, probably fine to come back. We see it doing stuff. You gotta do Chakanine plays because you can now get stuff into the graveyard. You gotta do some kind of like stuff that cares about being popped plays, but at the same time it's probably not too much of an issue, so that's totally fine. Masterpiece is maybe fine. I think Masterpiece probably has so much negative connotation that it doesn't need to come back, but I think there will be a point at which Masterpiece is fine to return. I don't think right now is the moment, especially not if you're trying to push decks that play with the extra deck. Hopefully the Pirates do that. I do hope that the Pirates see play. Caesar Sushi, welcome to the chat. Dragoon Beat. I am not familiar with Dragoon Beat. If anybody would like to expand on that, be very interesting. But I have not actually caught up on all of the OCG news as of late. Yes, dangers are just upstarts for people who hate greens. Elvis, yes, Plant Synchro era with dangers would have been absolutely absurd. Wanadzer, welcome to the party. It's Monday, I guess. Normal TKB stuff. Something that we will actually be doing is, so from what I'm hearing, is the Bristol Locals is likely to be starting up again, which means we will hopefully have a weekly local stream once a week from Ireland and once a week from the UK. And that way you can kind of follow what decks we're playing at the time. And, you know, you just get a feeling for what we do when we're not just talking to the camera about Yu-Gi-Oh cards, when we're actually playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I might play Noble Knights again soon. We'll see. What do I think about Spiral getting stuff back to ban list, asks Sketch. I think that's a little sketchy. No. Like, we know that the new Spellcaster card is coming out soon, which is going to boost Spiral. I really conceptually like Spiral. I love the effects of Tough, and I love the effects of Super Agent. I really dislike Spiral Double Helix, because it shifts the deck so much, and that's such a pity, because it is placed as such an interesting, cool concept. The idea of messing with your opponent's top decks and gaining knowledge not of the cards they currently have, but the cards they're yet to have is really cool. Excuse me. Sorry. So, and in Cube, the Spirals are really fun. I don't think Spiral needs any cards back. I think you could maybe put Drone to like 2. But the problem is, you know, the level 1 guys, if you put either of them to anything more, they become pretty absurd. If you put Resort to anything more than 1, it becomes pretty absurd. That card is so good. So, yeah, I don't think Spiral needs to get anything back, even though it's really good. Like, it is fine at the moment. It sits at like a perfectly respectable tier 2 deck. There's no reason to push it further than that at the moment. You know, I think if you buff Spiral much at all, it just becomes a tier 1 deck again. And I don't think we need that right now. How do I think they will hit Orcust? The most obvious hit is either hitting Galatea, Crescendo, or Babel. It'll probably be Babel. I would not be surprised if Babel got hit. Other considerations, hitting something like Boral Sword could happen. Boral Sword is a very contentious card in the game. I don't think Boral Sword is necessarily a problem per se, because you do need a way to actually end the matches. We don't want to be playing Pokemon. But, you know, I wouldn't consider it impossible to happen. But yeah, so with Orcust, I would expect, realistically, ban Gizmek seems completely reasonable. Gizmek is bonkers. And then, like, ban Babel as well, and the deck's probably fine. It ends on, like, it ends on being able to negate your first thing, Unicorn spin your second thing, and then have the ability to do stuff plus whatever hand traps it have. That's still a really strong deck. Or else, if you hit Crescendo instead of Babel, then it gets to end on, like, Topologic, blow up the board 2 or 3 times, or Zeraboros, or Trisbeata, or Unicorn. And all of those seem fine. I think having both the Counter Trap and Babel is probably part of what makes Orcust do too much at the moment. Exelion1985 asks, opinion on Harpies. So, Harpies is really cool. I was really excited at Utrecht this year. We got to feature it at the European Championships coverage. So I think we had Super Zulu, who is one of the big French channels, and he was playing it. Deck is really cool. It probably becomes better not being beholden to links. So the fact that you can now make like Chidori, and you know, you can make Dracosac, and you can make a bunch of stuff without having to care about zones. I hope that makes the deck better. I think it's always a deck that you can do well with because people don't know how to play against it. And also the Harpy's Featherstorm is crazy. That trap card is really strong. So yeah, I think Harpies, I would not necessarily take it to a YCS, but if I was feeling confident on the day, I could definitely see myself taking it to a regional, because I think when people don't know the deck, you can definitely get wins just through outplaying them. The Dragon Beat is the Red Eyes Dragoon Turbo, backed with a ton of hand traps and psalms. Dragon Beat is really interesting. We've been talking in the team chat about... so we've been talking in the team chat about the Red Eyes support and Red Eyes fusion. It's something that's on our radar. It's something that we're watching out for. I honestly need to look more into it. Again, I've been basically asleep for the duration of this holiday, but partially setting up this lovely green screen. But, you know, we are ready to focus ourselves back in. Once we get a list in January, we're basically full steam ahead into national season. So there's going to be a lot of studying. Red Eyes is definitely something I'd be keeping an eye out on, because that is something that is likely to really kind of impact the format. And, you know, the Red Eyes stuff has been kind of... it's been sitting okay already. Like, people have been speculating on that for a long time. And this could be the format where it gets to do stuff. For the Devs says, Harpies should get an in-archetype Feather Duster. Smiley face. Yeah, I mean, that'd be great, right? Could Harpies Feather Duster come back? I think so. I don't think it really makes much of a difference. Because, like, at the moment we have Cyclone, we have Twin Twisters. Often those are doing what Feather Duster would do anyway. Giant Trunade, that's a card that cannot come back. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we get Feather Duster to 1. OCG has 1 Feather Duster, 1 Raigeki. Seems fine. Yeah, Harpies is a very weird deck in that they do have a lot of powerful cards and still don't do anything. A lot of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Comes down to how important is your normal summon, and I think it's one of the decks where Harpies is one of the decks where the normal summon is very clutch. So if Harpies were to get extenders that allowed it to play true interaction on that point, then I could see them really kind of starting to do stuff. But I think at the moment it's just a case of, like, it has too many choke points too early on. And choke points are really important for, one, figuring out when you're playing against decks that you're not familiar with. Where's my point of interaction? When's the best time to Ash or Impermanence or Veiler or whatever other interaction you have? And yeah, so obviously the deck just currently has too many issues there. But those are things that are very easily fixed with support quite often. So it could be a case that we see the deck doing a lot more if it gets just a bit more support. And Konami have definitely been showing that it... you know, Konami has been showing that they are happy to support old archetypes, which is really cool. The Legendary Duelist packs, really cool. They do seem partially to be designing cards for Duel Links and building them into that, but that's totally fine as well. I was actually streaming Duel Links the other day, and some of the guys in the stream were saying, hey look, I'm getting into physical cards because I play Duel Links, so it's good to have products that link the two games up, because obviously Duel Links is very popular. It has like 100 million downloads or something crazy like that. John, if you could give us a bit more information on the 3-day tournament that will be done in Spain, or are you talking about YCSs? Because I'm not aware of any. I think there might be a card market series coming to Spain this year though, so I will need to double check that. Elvis asks, will you be keeping an eye on YCS Sydney? Of course. We, like, whether or not it's relevant to us, we are always paying attention to YCSs. It's close to the ban list, but at the same time, you can learn a lot from a YCS. If it's YCS followed by ban list, that would kind of suck. But, you know, it's always great to watch YCSs and see what's going on with them. Yeah, we definitely will be looking at Sydney, and we'll definitely have kind of our thoughts and feedback afterwards. They better make a Baby Yoda Cosmo. Okay, I mean, Cosmo is like a deck that I have it just sitting around. I have like a Go Second Cosmo list built, and I really want to play it, but I just like can't bring myself to do it yet. But Cosmo is the deck I would love to see support for. I have summoned a lot of Cosmo Forerunners. Cosmo Trap Tricks, very fun deck back in the day. But yeah, Cosmo Baby Yoda, it would be cute. I think Cosmo doesn't need much to be a very real Go Second kind of aggro deck, where you know, Cosmo, if Cosmo has a reliable destruction resource like Diagram or Fire King Island, plus a way to get 2 Cosmo monsters on board, the deck's really good. It can put out just tons of damage. Exelian 1985 says, so many good old school support, but Harpies have no good boss monster. That could be the issue for Harpies. It could just be they have no good boss monster. I guess Pet Dragon is meant to be their boss monster, but that hasn't really gotten much support in quite a while. So, I mean, maybe if we see like Harpies Pet Alternative Dragon, that could really push them towards doing good stuff. Caesar Sushi asks, will Hand Trap still be played with Tree Called, Tree Crossout, and Tree Instant Fusion? I mean, it's 75% to stop a Hand Trap for combo decks. That is true. But there is the issue that, you know, if you are going second, those cards all become a lot worse. So I think the issue with hand traps has always been, hey, look, there are cards that are better than hand traps, but you can play... You play the hand traps because you need to have the better going second game, not because you need to have the better going first game. Additionally, it's kind of, well, what combo decks are going to be able to afford to play Tree Called, Tree Crossout, and Tree Instant Fusion? Again, I'm under the impression that Pendulum is the best combo deck at the moment, and it doesn't really have space for those cards because every card in the deck has to be engine cards. Shane B says, what's up? Hello, Shane. Welcome. Not much. We're just talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff as we do on Mondays. Prince Murloc says Cosmo is still a super good deck. Yeah, I think Cosmo is decent. I think it has interesting interaction. Elvis says, unfortunately, no stream this year. That's a real pity. If you get information from the event, please do send us on to it. Send it on to us. Like, we are always very happy to signal boost stuff. And again, like, you know, I'm very happy to take deck lists and do profiles of them. So if there is any information from Sydney, we're always very happy to hear about it. Gus says, nice background. Thank you very much. We're looking very professional here. I need to sort out the lighting. We have this tiny little box room, and it's not great for getting the lights far enough away. I should be like an extra foot forward, but we're working with what we got. Arcanus Project. Okay. I will look that up, John. Gus wants Baboon's support. Now, do you want Baboon's support or do you want Bo-Baboon's support? Because I love Bo-Baboon. That is definitely one of my favorite cards. I'm not sure if there are enough cards which are just normal Baboons to really, you know, make it an archetype. But, you know, that hasn't stopped them before, so... So I'm going to look into this Arcanist project thing. That's pretty cool. There is a 3-day event over there. I'll have to look at it more. Seb is our resident Spanish correspondent, so I'll have to speak to him about it. Do I think the new Raw in the tins is good? Is this the Alt Art Raw, or are we talking about a new Winged Dragon of Raw card? Because I would need more context on that, Shane. For the devs, I've been playing Pen. I genuinely want to play like 80 cards. Yeah, I mean, that's the issue with Pendulum, is just it like, all of its cards are good cards. It doesn't have space for those interaction cards because you just beat your opponent by just like you just keep playing cards until your opponent either concedes or you have no cards left. That's basically how Pendulum works at the moment. Box room, best room. Box room is powerful. I just needed to like rearrange the entire room, throw everything everywhere just to set up the green screen. And then I was like, hey, wait a second, what do I actually do with a green screen? That's a question. I think overall, the green screen should be good because it means that we can, we're able to look at the background here and be like, hey, look, what's happening in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's great. And it means that when we're looking at gameplay, we have more space. So I think overall it's good, but it is perhaps a slightly redundant endeavor. Chad Phillips wants Blackwing and Hero to get support. It's been about a week before they've gotten anything. To be fair, Chad, if only there was a rules change coming up that both of those decks would be big fans of. Yeah. No, I guess not. The new Gold Sark promo. So the Raw in the Gold Sark tin is cool. I like the artworks of all of the Gold Sark promos. Nibiru, Dark Ruler No More, and Dimension Shifter are definitely the best cards in that, but that is neither here nor there. Darklaw, welcome to the chat. Please don't banish my hand. I didn't do any searching, I promise. Yes, people have been saying that I look like Jaskier from The Witcher. I have not actually watched The Witcher, but there is somewhere on the internet a little clip of me singing the song from it. So if you can find that, good luck and have fun. Maybe we'll do TKB the musical at some point, but today is not the day for that. No. I mean, is there much else to be talking about at this point? We have YCS Utrecht coming up. We have Card Market Series coming up. We have a lot of things like that, which will be interesting. Will we see Ash on 2 like in the OCG? No, I don't think so. First off, I mean, we see that putting stuff to 2, like, we've discussed it in the team. Putting cards to 2 is generally pretty irrelevant. The design differences between OCG and TCG suggest that Ash Blossom won't go to 2. I would not be surprised if Ash Blossom went to 2 if, and this is a very big if the Master Rule change means that they're going to be kind of realigning TCG with OCG, then Ash Blossom would go to 2, I guess. But I would still be very surprised if we saw that happening. I don't think we're going to see the sets combined because we'd need to get a bunch of catch-up stuff in the TCG. It would all be very difficult. But it's hypothetically something that could happen. We see more generators support. Jamie has been hyping up generators to me recently in work. I'm just not convinced that the deck does anything. Like, yeah, he summons himself and he's 2,500 guide during the opponent's turn. And you contribute himself to summon a level 9 generator monster with a different name from your deck. But, like, cool artwork, but I'm not convinced he has much of a place. Caesar Sushi, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be pretty weird until April. Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's something that we've talked about. The thing is that we have, you know, we have so many relevant events coming up before then that it means we do have to play. And we have a ban list coming up. So things are changing a lot. But it is really weird knowing, hey, look, at this just static point, then the game just changes drastically. So that will be very different. Like, the relevance of the format is all dependent on what your goals are. If you're not playing any competitive events before then, or you don't necessarily care too much about the competitive side of things, then yeah, I can definitely get that. Asha 2 to stop Max C. I mean, do we need Max C? I'm not sure. I still don't think Asha 2 really makes too much sense, but, you know, it's a weird one. Can Thunder be paired with anything? What do I think of Thunder? I mean, I think there are decks that you can pair Thunder with. Probably interesting things would be like, you know, with the new Master Rule, maybe Shadol or something like that. I think overall Thunder falls more into a category like a deck like Blue Eyes, where Thunder is a deck that very much enjoys interacting with its own cards. So I don't, like, if I want to build a deck of lots of different archetypes, Thunder isn't really where I would be going. There is, like, Thunder Draco, Thunder Dino, there's, you know, there's some weird Thunder variants, but, like, in terms of how well it meshes with other things, it's not the most common. Jamie is correcting me, saying that he was talking about Generator Invoked. Sure. I mean, I'm still not convinced that Generator Invoked does much that other decks do not. Yeah, so I mean, we're just kind of getting round to wrapping up here, as we have been live for roughly an hour and a half. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask before we call it a day? Additionally, we will be back to our normal scheduling. The UK guys will be back in the office, so as to say, from next Monday. So we'll be back to our regular TKB live. And yeah, we're going to be working on some more interesting content for you guys. So if you do have any content that you want to see, just give us a shout, let us know. Either let us know here or shoot us a message over on Facebook. Caesar, if you can shoot me over Dragoon lists, that'd be really cool. I'll definitely take a look at them. Best way to send them over is, again, generally Facebook or Twitter, or else, yeah, the problem with YouTube is you can't really send links because it censors them. So if you have Facebook or Twitter, you can find me on either of those. I think Salomon Great needs a hit. I think if you are hitting other decks, you probably hit Salmon Great. At the moment, I don't think it's a problem deck, but at the same time, Salmon Great really limits design space because you have cards like Foxy, and Foxy suddenly just limits what decks can be played. You know, if Salmon Great isn't hit and a deck like Striker is hit, then Striker kind of gets double hit because you have something like Foxy that interacts so strongly against the deck. So, yeah, I would say Salmon Great is likely to get a hit in some way, but if it does, it will just be a small one. Even just like a small hit, like Banning Dweller. Banning Dweller is something I'm okay with. I don't know if Abyss Dweller needs to exist anymore. Elvis, I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. Thank you for joining us this evening. Jenung Mua asks, what should get hit in Orchest? So we discussed this a little bit earlier, but basically what I would be hitting in Orchest would be Babel or Crescendo. Gizmek is another thing that I would consider. You could like put Nightmare to 1, or put Harpower to 1, get rid of Armageddon Knight and Grepher, or get rid of Mathematician. You know, those are all optional hits, but, you know, I think Babel or Crescendo are probably the places I'd be looking at. And again, Gizmek can go. I think that card's really bonkers. Shane asks, did I get any nice Yu-Gi-Oh product for Christmas? I don't think I actually got any Yu-Gi-Oh product this Christmas, which is kind of weird. I normally get a lot more. I don't think so. I've been going through my collection, though, because there's, like, so many cards that suddenly become a lot better. So we have been doing a lot of tiering. So that is something to... Yeah, that's basically it. Thank you, Juan, for joining us for the stream. Glad you're enjoying it. Gus asks, do I like playing against Dracos? I have played a lot of Draco mirror matches back with Masterpiece. I think Draco is fine. If we want to get into specifics and we look at game design and we ask, if you're asking like, hey Daniel, as a game designer, do you think floodgates are good for the game? That's a completely different question. As for like Draco as a deck, I think the deck's fine. I think like the place that it's currently in, it like punishes people for kind of being overly reliant on certain cards, and it definitely punishes the game for being so specialized at this point. And I think that's kind of the place that Yu-Gi-Oh stands at the moment, is decks are very specialized. You know, the current decks in the format, part of their issue is they aren't very consistent. Another part of their issue is they really struggle to find slots for tech cards. You know, we don't have a hand trap that deals with spell and trap cards, with the exception of the fringe case that is infinite impermanence. And so that's something that Draco can really take advantage of. Prince Murloc asks, do we plan to make a Discord? We actually do have a Discord. You can join it. It's part of our Patreon. So for just $1 a month, you can support Team Kuribrohs and also have access to the Discord. And there we just have everybody in a team, plus a few of our patrons. So that is our current Discord plans. If there's enough interest, we might open the Discord up a bit more. Like, as it is, we're not the most tech savvy group, I guess, despite having a few computer scientists and engineers and stuff. So Discord isn't the most common platform that we use, but it is something that we try to focus on, particularly as we're coming up to competitive events. Okay, so, I mean, thoughts on the Salmon Great Link 4? I don't think it's very necessary. I think I would probably rather have a Boral Sword. The issue is that the Salmon Great Link 4 is just too easy to interact with, and it costs a lot of advantage to go into. So it's not blown me away yet. In a different format, it probably becomes a lot better. But at the moment, it's kind of... You know, it what does it do that another card can't do better? It's kind of too all-round. It's like, am I a big beater, or am I a blow up the board? I'm not sure. I've just not seen enough of it to have a clear idea of, like, either, yeah, it's bonkers, or B, it's terrible. But it seems pretty middling, which is kind of surprising. It seemed like the sort of thing that the deck would want. Gus asks, would the game be better if there were no floodgates at all? I mean, again, that comes to like a really big game design question. I think the game as it currently exists kind of needs floodgates to an extent. You would have to fundamentally change the design direction to a much more interactive game. So the problem is that, like, you know, you have decks that end on like 3 points of interaction, while a player only has one normal summon. And so that fundamentally warps every single aspect of the game. where, you know, in the very like base concept of Yu-Gi-Oh, it is I normal summon a guy, you normal summon a guy. We use something to power up our guy so he beats your guy. If you have a trap card, your guy beats my guy. But the game has developed so far beyond that floodgates are definitely a way to kind of allow you to choke resources on your opponent. So like there can be only one, for example. You know, it really punishes people for playing mono type decks. Is that good for the game? I mean, it depends. Like, do you have fun when you resolve there can be only one? Do you feel smart for finding these cards and being like, hey, look, this attacks a certain thing? I don't think you can print cards that solve problems in the format without making them floodgates is the problem. You know, like, what's the difference between Macrocosmos and DD Crow? It's a very big difference. Do I think Thunder might get hit? I don't think Thunder needs to get it. I don't think it would affect it too much if it did. But again, like, it's a really difficult question because there are two different ways that this list can go. Way one is that it's a tune-up list like we've seen the last couple of TCG lists where they just hit everything a little bit. Way two would be that it's a large hit. We know that Thunder is going to be a lot better in April, being able to end on as many Colossus as they want. But I don't think you preemptively hit it in January. So I think if Thunder is going to be around, if Thunder is going to be hit, I don't think this is the list that they hit it on. I honestly don't think it's too much of a problem. It does have the issue that Colossus limits kind of deck building space, where like if you remove Orcust from the format, suddenly Thunder becomes really good, and suddenly any deck that searches becomes significantly worse. At the moment, I think Thunder is quite weak because it has such a weak Orcust matchup, and we see that Orcust is such a highly represented deck in the field. But if that were to change, then I think Thunder Dragon gets boosted by that. And so if that's what's expected to happen, then you could also tune down Thunder a little bit by like putting Colossus to 1 or something along those lines. But I would be kind of surprised if that happened. Floodgates shouldn't be permanent, they should only last for one turn. Again, that gets us to the Lancia problem for the devs, which is, you know, Lancia is really good against a deck like Thunder, where the cards don't do anything if you Lancia them, whereas it becomes really bad against a deck like Orcust, where Lancia kind of halfway stops them, but doesn't really. So that is something to watch out for. So that's kind of the struggle with Floodgates, right? It's like, you know, Droll and Lockbird is fine as a once per turn thing, but the problem is, like, you know, if a Floodgate stops everything, does it just come down to a point of, if I Floodgate my opponent, I can then go on to just kill them? Because that's not very healthy for the game. You know, it's not terribly fun if I am just playing my own game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then my opponent just goes, like, Droll, Boral Sword, kill you. But at the same time, it's no fun for the opponent if they're sitting there and they, like, ash your first thing and then you just go, like, full Cannon Soldier FTK. So I think there's a balance that needs to be found there. And I think where the game currently stands, those hand traps are the like, just, the floodgates are a solution to that. Are they a healthy solution to it? I don't know. As a designer, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I think it's so difficult to find replacements for them. And that's all because we just have such an explosive start to the game. If you could only play spell and trap cards going first, the game would be completely different. So that's something that is my ramble on Floodgates for this evening. Yeah, for the devs, yeah, they can just use the resources to kill you if you didn't. But, like, we saw Dimension Barrier. Dimension Barrier is another Floodgate that only works for one turn. Like, the only decks that are playing Floodgates like that are the decks that kill people in one turn. Or that accrue so much advantage that they end the game on that turn. So, you know, that's an issue. Darklaw, how do I feel about Borrelsword being a card? I discussed this a little bit earlier on. So, I understand Borrelsword is a divisive card. I can see that, you know, I can see that it frustrates players, and it's definitely a very strong card, right? But is it necessarily a problem in the format? I'm not sure. I think it was much more of a problem kind of last summer. Like, it's kind of, if my opponent can climb into a link 4 plus a monster that can be switched to defense, should they be allowed to win the game at that point? And there has to be a break point at which it is acceptable for a player to be able to end the game quickly. You additionally need to have points that allow less skillful players and less experienced players to win games. So, like, a big issue with the current format, if Borrelsword didn't exist, is, like, if you end up in an Orcust mirror, then it could potentially always go to the more experienced player if you're just playing grind games, because grind games will generally favor the player with more experience, as they will be more used to managing their resources. So I don't think Borrelsword is, like, the most egregious issue ever. At the same time, I would not cry if it were banned, but, you know, I think there's bigger boogeymen in the formats. Tafin is saying that D-Barrier was played in pretty much everything. Yeah, maybe D-Barrier is a bad example. Like, Dimension Barrier was just a crazy strong card. But I mean, you say that even Paleo played it, but Paleo was a deck that was trying to essentially end the game, because if you time walk your opponent by resolving Dimension Barrier, and then you end on, like, Toad Opabenia or, like, Double Toad, you know, what is your opponent doing from there? So, you know, there is a certain point where the game is still continuing, but your opponent is not in a position to actually ever win the game. And Dimension Barrier is definitely a card that attempts to achieve that. So, I mean, again, Dimension Barrier is on the rise. The fact that links are generically accessible is nice, in that it means Dimension Barrier may have slightly less impact. But, like, at the same time, you know, I'll be interested to see how well Dimension Barrier does now that we have so many more hand traps. You know, is it better to Dimension Barrier your opponent, or is it better to Nibiru your opponent? Nibiru also becomes more awkward to get rid of the token, because you may be on a deck that is wanting to play its extra deck cards instead of link monsters. On the other hand, you can just summon things anyway, and you don't need to care about arrows. So I don't know. Eli asks, how do you feel about Lulite rank 4 deck in Master Rule 5? Tiger is a crazy card. Lunalight is a crazy deck. I have absolutely no issue with Tiger being hit. Again, Lunalight comes down to a deck that just does infinite stuff. And in the same way that Pendulum potentially does too much, I think Lunalight potentially does too much as well. So I would personally not see any issue with hitting Lunalight. It's also the fact that the deck interacts really positively with dangers, which is not a great sign. I don't want to see dangers more frequently going into new rules. So yeah, I have no issue with either hitting Lunalight or getting rid of Dweller, because rank 4s don't need a Floodgate. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all of the questions people have. If people do have more questions, I'm quite happy to stay around and chat and Terry and stuff. And otherwise, I will shut off the stream and start preparing for tomorrow. Because tomorrow is the last day of the year, guys. We made it through 2019. Okay, well, with that, we are going to call it a stream. Thank you all very much for joining, not just for this stream, but for just getting involved with all of the videos for the past year. We really do, like, just for myself and Tom and the rest of the guys, we really do appreciate all of the support we've gotten this year. And, you know, we're really excited to kind of grow this channel and help you guys improve as players and just enjoy the game more. So I hope you all have a lovely New Year's Eve, and I will see you all in 2020 for more Yu-Gi-Oh! What deck am I most excited about? Tafin coming in with the last minute question. Going into April 2020. I mean, so in my heart of hearts, I want to play Shaddoll. My gut feeling is that Shaddoll is not the deck. I think the Shaddoll main deck monsters just aren't in a strong enough position to do anything. If Orcust is not hit, then I think Orcust is probably still the deck. If Orcust is hit, then Synchro is definitely where I'm going to be looking first, and then I will explore outwards from there. But if summoning Trishula multiple times is good, then that definitely will be one of the starting points. But I think there's a lot of time between now and then. Like, there are a lot of decks that I would love to be good, but I think there are very few of those that will actually be good. You know, we see the usual hype cycle that we see every year. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe even it's just play Guru, or play Altergeist, or play some sort of trap deck. Pendulum could still be good. I'm really not that hot on Pendulum. But yeah, it's still very early days going into April 2020, and we have a lot of sets between now and then. You know, we have Crystron Needle Fiber that's going to shake things up. So yeah, it's I'm going to give you a bad answer, which is I don't have a proper answer. But I mean, yeah, Shaddoll is definitely going to be one that I'm going to look at very quickly. Oh No Paleo is probably a deck that I'll look at. It's one that I played a lot. ABC is one that's kind of interesting. I think ABC has probably been power crept. DDD is something that I've played in the past, but again, I fear that DDD doesn't necessarily have a place going into the next format. So that's my general thoughts. We really need to get a feeling for, you know, what is the shape of that format before we can before I'd feel comfortable saying, hey, look, this is the deck that I'm going to start the format on, if that makes sense. Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining. We will catch you in the new year and have a lovely time. Shout outs to Calvin. Sure. ABC Test Tech.